Okay, it looks like we're live.
Great, thank you, Mary. I will call this meeting of the Cincinnati Board of Park Commissioners to order. And first of all, I'd like to welcome everybody that is joining us by YouTube. We are conducting this meeting virtually by Zoom conference call. And I will point out to the public that City Council did pass an ordinance in June that authorized boards and commissions to be able to conduct their meetings via electronic purposes or methods such as Zoom. We are, as I mentioned, live streaming, so this is available to the public on our Cincinnati Parks YouTube station. But because we are virtual, I'd like, Mary, would you call the roll of commissioners just so we have that on record?
Yes. President Getz.
Here.
Vice President Thomas.
Here.
Commissioner Castellini. I believe she is not present today. Commissioner Lindner.
Here.
Commissioner North.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Our first order of business is public comments, and I will just report that commissioners have received any and all comments that were submitted to the Park Board in advance of this meeting. I do want to point out that we have received public comments relating to number one, drag racing by vehicles and pedestrian safety issues along Mering Way that borders Smail Park. We also received correspondence relating to the biochar pilot project that we'll be talking about today, and then also comments about the Burnett Woods Dog Park. So there were no other public comments, but they have all been received and read by the commissioners. Our next order of business is approval of our minutes from the last July 15 meeting. Has everyone had an opportunity to read those? And if so, are there any corrections, additions, or deletions? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve.
Thank you, Linda. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Brad. Mary, can you roll call, please, for approval and adoption of minutes?
President Getz.
Yes.
Vice President Thomas.
Yes.
Commissioner Castellini is not present. Commissioner Lindner.
Yes.
Commissioner North.
Thank you. Our minutes are approved. The next item, we're pleased to have with us Captain Swingley from the Cincinnati Police Department. Thank you for being here this morning, and thank you for presenting a report to us. And I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Good morning, everyone. In July, I was away for training. So a couple of weeks ago, I wanted to get you the stats and reports to you so you could review beforehand. So I've been working with my crime analyst, and we've been having some issues, and which the reason these issues are, the crime analysts, when they give me stats, they have like 700 locations, not just the parks that you represent, but like recreations, other things like you've seen, like the Over the Rhine Rec Center show up in some of my reports and stuff like that. So Jenny Mobley has been excellent in helping me to fine tune our stats, but we're not there yet. So with that, I'm going to go over a few things. As you know, when we look at parks, we look at not only the park, but like the street around the park, like Washington Park. If something happens in the street, it's within view of the park and it affects the park. So just to give you an example of what I've been dealing with the last couple of weeks, I have a chart here that says the top 10 parks by numbers of arrest. And the top one was Avon Fields Golf Course. I'm thinking, why is that so? So I went back and forth to the caps, and is immediately recognizable by me as District 4 headquarters is right across from Avon Fields. So when people go in there to turn themselves in to be arrested in a new court date, it counts as an arrest. So we are working to get these stats down as fine-tuned as possible. With that, I can tell you that overall, citywide, there were over 70,000 calls for service in the second quarter of this year. This is a 1% increase from over this same time frame as last year. The top 3 parks for second quarter for calls for service was Mount Airy Forest, which had 164 calls for service for second quarter. And this is down from the second quarter of 2020 that had 182 calls for service. And then Mount Airy Forest in July had 65 calls for service, which is up from 2020, which had 54. So there we go. Eden Park had 140 calls for service in the second quarter of this year. And this is up from second quarter from 2020, which had 122 calls for service. So the top 5 arrest charges and citations that we're seeing in the parks is arrest, criminal damaging, and the cops respond out to make police reports for damaging in the park, drug abuse, and things of that nature. Now I know Deputy Director Mobley asked me some information about 2 major homeless encampments that have been popping up in Stanberry Park at the Kyle Plush Pavilion and Inwood Park near the tennis courts. So I drove by Stanberry Park. I live on the east side, and talking to the neighborhood liaison officers, and they say there's no camp per se, but there's a number of individuals sleeping at the pavilion over the nighttime on a nighttime basis. And what they're doing, they're using the electrical outlets to charge your cell phones and stuff like that. So the neighborhood liaison is still paying attention to those concerns and addressing those issues. Now, as far as Inwood Park in the Hollister Recreation Area, I've been told that this is an ideal environment for the homeless people because the tennis courts have not been utilized in a while and they're up there off the road. And this is an ideal location, right? They can go down the street for social services and they can go up the street to the restaurants and have excellent panhandling locations. So the neighborhood liaison team is still focusing their attention on that, and I'll give you some more updates as we go along. I know we had a tragic incident at Smail Park on July 4th that almost everybody's heard of. So I just want to recap on some of the information I can share with you. It's still under investigation, so I can just give you an overview. On July 4th, about 10:50 p.m., there were officers in the park at the time due to large crowds of youth. Shots rang out and it quickly turned into a shooting offense where they located 3 individuals in the park that were shot. The oldest one was a 19-year-old and the youngest victim was a 14-year-old. So this is a tragic incident, and we called in officers from Kentucky, Cincinnati, and Hamilton County to lock the scene down and make sure everybody's safe. Just a couple examples of the officers who responded. There's Officer Stanton, Thomas Stanton, applied a tourniquet to a female who was 16 years old with a gunshot wound to her arm. Realizing the traffic and the jams, that he put her in his car and drove her up to University Hospital to get her treated. Another officer, Joshua Condon, who works for me in the Gun Crimes Task Force, he provided advanced medical care for the 19-year-old. Unfortunately, this 19-year-old succumbed to his injuries. So right now it's still under investigation and no arrests have been made. And right after that incident, Chief Isaac initiated extra patrols on the weekends, focused on Smail Park, but available for all the other parks on the weekends. So we have civil disturbance response teams, as well as SWAT support on the weekends in the evening hours to ensure everyone's safe, not only in the Smail Park area, but they're able to respond out to the other areas as well. So that's about all I have right now. Is there any questions?
Any questions from the commissioners? Captain, I appreciate you coming in, and I appreciate the work directly with Jenny and the cooperation that we are having with Cincinnati Police. If there's anything from a board standpoint that you would recommend for us to do in the future, we want to make sure we're doing everything we can as a park board to provide a safe location for all the Cincinnati residents to be in our parks. So whatever we can do or anything that we can facilitate, we want to be your partners with this.
Thank you very much. And if you have any feedback for me, you can relay that to Jenny, and she'll get it to me so I can fine tune the stats and information to you so I can provide the best information to you. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Captain.
Thank you.
And thank you, Jenny, for continuing to work on this issue. I know we face issues in many of our parks, and it's an important issue that the community and the citizens are keenly aware of, and I appreciate your ongoing work directly with the police department. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Yes, Captain Swingley has been great to work with, and he has really reached out to a lot of the neighborhood liaisons for me to get some of my questions answered, and I appreciate all the cooperation we have as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny, and thank you again, Captain.
Mr. President.
Yes, Linda.
I do have a question. We had heard previously that there was a continuing problem with motorcycles and the like in Eaton Park. And I know as a response to that, we put in the speed bumps. As you did not mention anything about Eaton Park, does that mean that that problem has diminished, been abated, the speed bumps have been effective? What is the status there? You're muted.
I can tell you that in July, there were 10 or 13 calls for service, and officers have been in the park for what they call directed patrols, where they go into the park and spend 15 minutes or more in the parks. And that happened on 10 different occasions in July. So I would like to contact the District 4 commander and get that information to Jenny, and relay that back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Great. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Our next area is action items, and the first one on the list is dog park. And Director Kish, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, good morning, commissioners. Very pleased to re-engage in this conversation with you. We've had a robust conversation over the last couple of months, which really is, we're getting towards the culmination of at least 18 months of community conversations and conversations about this topic. But at last month's board meeting, staff presented the board with some potential sites for a dog park installation in the Clifton community. And after discussion at the last meeting, it was the preferred site that the board had mentioned for the northeast corner of Burnett Woods. And at that time, you tasked staff with presenting you with more information, more concise information about what a dog park on that site would look like and what would be costs associated and any impacts on the site. So what we are presenting to you today is the culmination of those additional efforts. Some considerations that we're taking into account were some review of surfacing options and also review of layout options. And what we are presenting to you today is 3 potential options available to the commissioners at this time, which look at that site and judge for different footprints of the park. We are intending at this time to present you with presenting you with the recommendation to consider a turfed surface. It is roughly the equivalent of the costs associated with the parks that we created in Washington Park and Westwood Town Hall, but it will provide a different image than the other parks that we've created, where instead of concrete surfacing, we would be looking at turfed surfacing. I did have a sample for you, but as we're not in person, I can't put that in front of you at this moment. But it is a very high quality product where there's a lot of permeation for water to go directly through the product, and that's good for keeping the surface clean. So at this time, we've prepared quite an extensive board report for you, kind of looking into the details of those different recommendations. And ideally, as we go through the conversation today, what staff is seeking from the board is a discussion and potentially direction for staff to continue to determine what the recommendations on the site are, to can engage in more community feedback, and ultimately determine today whether or not conversations should continue for the site. So we are, again, provided you with an extensive board report, and we're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Kara. I do want to commend you on a detailed report. Can I open it up? Any discussion questions for Kara from the board?
I just have one question. And first, I also want to commend you and the staff on this very comprehensive review on this. I think I cited very clearly my strong preference for this site, and I think it's very ideal for what we seek. One point of opinion here, which is that you presented 3 options for size, and I'd just like to endorse something that is between the 10 and 15,000 square foot option. I think the 19,000 square foot option encroaches maybe a little bit too closely to the neighboring residents. And I think that would make it significantly larger than Washington Park or Westwood Town Hall locations. And in the spirit of maintaining a neighborhood oriented dog park, I'd suggest that the small or the mid-size option is probably appropriate. The question I have for you is really about the tree. I think there's a large area here that's got plenty of space for open running. The goal here would be that there would be 0 impact on the tree environment in this area. Can you discuss that?
Yes, well, one of the advantages that we'll have in kind of the next iteration is to go out and actually stake the footprint. So, you know, these are lines on an aerial, which were very intentional lines, but we would be ensuring that the fence line does not impact the trees directly. So I think the correct answer to your response is we would be doing this with minimal to no impact to the tree, the drip lines, and any trees on site.
So that's going to determine the ultimate size of the dog park then?
No, we are currently able to perform any of the options.
You can get 19,000 feet without obstructing or damaging any trees?
Yes, okay. And the potential for trees to remain, with inside of the fence line is also something that we have. I think it's a good option if any of them fall within there. But we will be doing this with minimal impact in close coordination with our natural resources team. So we will be incredibly thoughtful, considerate, and intentional of where the fence line is placed. At this time, these are, fairly hard lines on an aerial rather than actually surveyed, staked. But hopefully that answers your question, Commissioner North.
It does. Thank you.
And I would agree with Molly that you want to definitely have some buffer between the houses and the dog park.
So you would also be supportive of removing the 19,000 square foot option?
I guess it's 2 issues for me. One is the impact to the trees, as well as then how it fits within the neighborhood. And we had heard from previous folks, around Denor that neighbors aren't necessarily thrilled about having a dog park right next door to them. So to have some buffer zone to have some separation there, I think would be a good idea. I guess the other question I have is how, or is there some sense that we can get a feel for the call it dog population relative to Westwood and or Washington Park that may inform us as to whether we need to, stretch it to the 19,000 to, have a, comfortable space for all the dogs, or would, 10 to 15,000 feet suffice? And I don't know how you do that. If there's a dog census, that we could take.
Well, there is not, but the good news is we've conducted a lot of surveys already. I think it's safe to say that we have a large dog population. I wouldn't presume that the dog population is going to be much higher than the population that visits Washington Park, and that's an unscientific inference. But to know that we are talking about a space that is going to be larger than Washington Park. Washington Park is very heavily utilized, and it does provide enough space for the community to access that park. So
okay.
Very unscientifically, I think that both the 10,000 and 15,000 foot option would still provide an adequate space. And we're going to also, as we continue conversations with the community, one of the suggestions that staff gave to the board early on, and I think we should continue with it, is to provide kind of a prototype going forward, to go out onto the site, to put stakes in the ground, and even potentially operate kind of a trial date where we're putting up snow fencing, something to that effect, and actually just see the footprint and the population which visits it. But I do think that given the fact that we have constructed and operated smaller built dog parks and see that they're being utilized well or not being overrun, they're busy, but they're not overrun. I think that it's safe to say that both of these, again, unscientific, but I think we can determine that those size sites will work for this site.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes, I also want to say thank you to the staff for a very thorough report. It was very, very helpful. And while this was not, and when we were presented the options earlier, this was not the one that came to the top of my list. Based on what is reported here, it seems like a good idea. The real concern I have was whether and how the residents and the people who frequently use the park would respond. But based on the information you presented, I think it's an excellent idea. I too agree that 19,000 square feet is too much for all the reasons that have been stated. And I would opt for the lower end because it's even bigger than the ones we've done. And if we think that is a viable size, I'm like, why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we choose the smaller footprint? But I know there's some additional information to be gained as we go forward. But I think either of those options would be good options for that space and for the people who would use it. So I think good information for us in terms of giving us what we need to help us with the decision. So thank you.
Yeah, I will just concur with the other commissioners. I think 19,000 square foot, the way it's shown here, I do think it borders the roadway. And I think that given the 10,000 and 15,000 square foot options, I think it continues then to keep this dog park in an area where it's not as visible from the street as there's been some concerns raised. And to everyone's point, I think the fact that either 10,000 or 15 will be larger than what we see down at either Washington Park or on the Westwood Town Hall dog park sites. I like your suggestion that we go out and flag or stake out what the footprint would be. I think that would be a great way visually for us to see And if we see that a 10,000 square foot site is plenty for what we're looking to accomplish, I think that would be great as well. So is there a recommendation from the commissioners on moving forward, how we go forward with this?
I would be willing to socialize one, Jim, which is, I understand there is more work to do. I also just want to draw a point to commend the staff for the significant community engagement that you have done. This has obviously been of great interest to the community, and there's been a great deal of input provided, all of which is certainly well-intentioned, and much of which is very valuable for the design of the park. I think there have been some great recommendations for consideration on how this operates and is designed, and gates and benches, and I think very valuable as we proceed. So I'm again very grateful to the Clifton community for their energy for the project, whether it's been in opposition or in support of. Here, we had socialized when we discussed the budget, $150,000 allocation to this project. And I'd just socialize that we consider approving that contribution to this project with the call for the PUP group or another fundraising group to coalesce around closing the gap. And I would also like to engage that ideally fundraising group to engage in the size, because there is an impact on cost as well. There's a difference in price for the 10,000 square foot versus 15,000 square foot. And it doesn't have to be 10 or 15. It could be some square footage in between that. But cost is certainly a consideration here as well. And I don't exactly know how this works, but perhaps it is something that we can dog ear through the end of 2022 in hopes that we can get the fundraising goal completed and started with the project before that date. So again, socializing this for commissioners' consideration.
Then hearing I agree with your comments. I think what we're hearing then is that we appreciate and accept what the staff has presented to us. I think you're absolutely right. I think the next step would be to engage with a local group to help us do fundraising for this and talk through the concept of ongoing fundraising, whether it be on an annual, twice a year, or some opportunity to do fundraising for the ongoing maintenance of the park as well as the initial development. So I would agree that perhaps what we're saying then is we should move forward. We had on the table discussion about 150,000. Perhaps what we could do is approve in concept the park with 150,000 dedicated from the Commissioners Fund, as we have discussed, with the next steps being to engage with the local community to establish a fundraising initiative to raise funds, and perhaps have you report back to us. This is August, maybe by the November meeting, of where we stand with that fundraising, and let that fundraising initiative help us determine if it's a 9,000, 10,000, or 15,000 square foot facility. But during that time as well, as you indicated, get people over, get some thoughts. If we do see that when we stake it out that a 10,000 square foot is great, then that helps us to determine that that's where we would go with the final footprint for the park.
Yeah, I greatly appreciate everybody's feedback. We will definitely proceed with the intention of speaking to you again in November, having completed that additional community engagement, as well as speaking with potential groups who could assist us with fundraising efforts. So thank you very much for your contributions today and the direction, and we will get on it.
And I would go ahead. Yes, Linda.
I just have another question, because there was something in the report about the potential for charging for memberships or charging for use. And as I read that, I understood that there's some precedent for it in other places, but it sounded like a complexity to me that I had no idea how to manage. And so I would not suggest that we move forward with that as a potential option for funding. Rather, we focus on the contribution that we are wanting to approve and having fundraising close the gap.
I'll echo that, Linda. I fully agree with you. I think Cincinnati parks are for everybody, and I don't like the concept of charging for use for something like that. I think it's a great opportunity to raise money ahead of time to be able to have the funds to create it, and then also on an ongoing basis do fundraising for ongoing maintenance. So I agree with you.
Just one other suggestion or point. Since our dog census is unscientific and we don't really know how many dogs will be using that park, maybe to consider some when designing the park, if they're whatever we decide upon, 9, 10, 11,000 feet, if it does become overcrowded with dogs, to potentially design into the initial design some opportunity to expand it relatively inexpensively. So just, you know, not knowing how many dogs are in the area versus Westwood or Washington Park, we take our best shot, but maybe leave a little bit of bailout space if we need to add an extra 1,000 or 2 feet, and where would that be? So, you know, not to design ourselves into a corner.
Question.
Sorry, muted. I would also like to address some of the input that we've also received relation to the MLK site, which there continue to be some interest in that site. I think it's important that everyone know that Cincinnati Park staff, the director herself, has reached out to management at Good Sam Hospital. And we have spoken directly to them about the MLK site that's been proposed. And knowing that their interest is to not have any discussions for at least 2 years, we as a park board, I think, are still interested, and the director has indicated an interest in continuing to discuss with Good Sam the concept of a greenway there, which might be able to be developed, incorporating their site at some point as a parking area. But as we're looking at trying to affect a start date for this project in Burnett Woods, that if we can start by the end of the year, that precludes us from waiting for 2 years to actually site a dog park. But it doesn't preclude us from continuing to discuss with them the opportunity for green space, for trails, for other things that may be of interest to the community.
Great. Thank you, Jim. As that was the site that personally I preferred, I appreciate that comment, and I think that's good information for the community. I did have a question related to Brad's comment about maintaining the option of expansion at some point in the future if we find that the dog population is greater than we anticipated. Is there any practice with these kind of areas, like buildings, where you have a sign that says maximum capacity? So we manage that somehow until we figure it out and not have it be overcrowded in the meantime. Is that a practice at all?
I haven't seen it. I think that, outside of COVID, when we were trying to be mindful of the amount of people in a specific space, I haven't seen it. It's not that we couldn't, although things like that are generally very difficult to enforce unless we had somebody there on site. But kind of to respond to your comment, as well as Commissioner Lindner's comment, I think the design itself, as it's been presented to you, is going to lend very easily, if we did build the 10,000 square foot option, to expand to the 15, to expand to the 19 if necessary, because you really would be looking at, too simplistic, but effectively looking at expanding the end of the fence line and installation of the surface at the end. So I think we're in a good position at this site to grow if necessary. And Linda, to your comment, we could make our very best attempt. I'm not aware of how fire code or anything would apply, if it does apply. But with things like that, we would have difficulty enforcing it. So, I have seen some dog parks that end up having attendants at it. So if we find ourselves in a place where capacity is just ridiculous, completely jam-packed, we could potentially explore an option of having an attendant there during the busiest times. But as a starting point, I would not think it's necessary to establish a maximum users, but rather to monitor. And as we said, we have Washington Park and Westwood Town Hall as a very good benchmark for how the spaces are occupied with a large portion of dog owners.
Sure.
Go ahead, Linda.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to be clear. I was not suggesting that we have somebody there to monitor it. I was just thinking in our QR codes or whatever, we let people know for safety reasons, we recommend it not exceed whatever. But just a question.
I think also we have, I think dog owners should be responsible, and I think they will be self-policing from the standpoint that if it's going to be too crowded, I can imagine many users would just not bring their dog in. But to the director's comments, the issue will be monitoring the use to see if it is continuously overpopulated or the demand is there for a bigger space, that we could address that. Well, thank you. I appreciate the discussion. I think we have a path forward. And again, thank you very much, Kara, for the work that you and your staff have done.
Mr. President, do we need a motion for the?
Well, here's where, let me state where I think we are, and we can determine, do we need a motion? I think we are giving direction, and if we would like to do a motion that may help with the director. I think we're in agreement that we would be looking to develop the dog park as presented to us in the board packet this month. The next step, and we would at this point continue to identify 150,000 that this board would commit towards from the Commissioners Fund, that we would move to engage the community for fundraising efforts to raise the shortfall for the cost to develop, and also to get commitments for funding contributions for this park, and that at the November meeting, by the November meeting, we might find that this is something that will do extremely well from fundraising. We're not limited to that, but by the end of November, or at the November meeting at the latest, come back with a recap for where we stand with fundraising, and that the board's preference is not to go to the 19,000, that we would keep it on the smaller side, but also then let the input received after staking the site and getting a sense for the fundraising opportunities that we have to make a final decision on the size and commitment of funds, perhaps at the November meeting. What's your preference? Do you want to make a motion to that effect or just adopt that?
It's okay for me if we just adopt that as you would delineate it and address it in November. That's
Yeah.
where I am.
I'm with Linda on that. I think, it's still a little loose, but I think you've provided enough direction and I think there's consensus in that direction that we go forward with that and then maybe tighten it up with a motion in November.
Great. Well, let's take that approach. And again, I appreciate the input. I appreciate all the input from the community. And I want to commend Kara and her staff as well for the community engagement that you've shown on this project. So thank you. Let's move on. The next section is easements. We've got a couple easements that we need to approve. Cindy's on the line with us. The first one being approval of easement to Cincinnati Bell in their work to install Wi-Fi at both Avon Woods and Alt Park. This motion just provides them the authority to come in and install that fiber lines for the Wi-Fi. Does anybody have questions for Cindy related to this easement request? If not, can I have a motion to accept the recommendation for approving easement to Cincinnati Bell?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you, Brad. We have a motion and second. Mary, can you do a roll call, please?
President Getz,
Yes.
Vice President Thomas.
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Castellini is not present. Commissioner Lindner,
Yes.
Commissioner North,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you. And the next one is an easement for Duke Energy related to the Cincinnati Art Museum site in their work to redevelop and put in an entrance off Eden Park to the Cincinnati Art Museum. To do that, they're requesting an easement to be able to put a new gas line in feeding the art museum that will encroach on, or part of the line is on park property. So Cindy has brought forth to us, staff is recommending that we approve this easement for the development or installation of a new gas line. Is there questions for Cindy related to this one? If not, can I have a motion to approve the recommendation?
So moved.
Thank you, Brad. A second?
Yeah.
Thank you, Molly. We have a motion. Mary, can you do a roll call again, please?
President Getz,
Yes.
Vice President Thomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Castellini is not present. Commissioner Lindner,
Yes.
Commissioner North,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you. And thank you, Cindy, for your work on this and for being available for questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner.
The next item is grant application and acceptance. This is a very interesting presentation. Director, do you want to lead us into this?
Yeah, I can't help you with any of the technicalities. That's definitely going to be Crystal. I'm very pleased to have our Division Manager of Natural Resources, Crystal Courtney, with us today to talk about a really interesting and exciting opportunity that we can bring here to Cincinnati Park. So, Ms. Courtney, would you please let us know what this grant is all about?
Yes, ma'am. I have a short video here, or short presentation. All right, so thank you all very much for the opportunity today. I am going to be presenting two items on the agenda. It's pretty much summarizing some of the background work I've had the opportunity to work on this season. So this is a very unique opportunity for the city. We've been working with Bloomberg Philanthropies for the past, I'd say, 4 months. In March of March of this year, we had applied in partnership with the Office of Environmental Sustainability to do a feasibility study for implementation of a biochar facility in the city of Cincinnati. So this is a replication project from some work that was done in Stockholm in 2015, where they were able to take the city's wood waste and turn it into biochar, which is then used in planting throughout the city. Like I mentioned, in March, we applied. We were one of 10 cities throughout the world that were chosen to participate, which was really kind of mind-blowing for me. And since then, we've been working closely with the experts at Bloomberg and some of the leaders in Stockholm to identify what the best methodology would be for implementation in Cincinnati. So with that, we've been reviewing inputs, outputs, potential uses of the materials. We've been reviewing, different types of facilities in order to produce the biochar, and also reviewing areas throughout the park board property that we might be able to install this system. So my goal in coming to you today is for review of kind of the project that we've come up with to date, a little bit of information about what biochar actually is and how we plan on using it, and just asking for the ability to move forward with the next round of the grant application, which is a continued effort towards feasibility, implementation, and match funding that could come from Bloomberg Philanthropies. So first and foremost, what is biochar? So biochar is it's a substance that's been very much up and coming in the urban forestry industry. So in areas where we have urban soils that are relatively deployed of nutrients and have really poor soil structure, are very compacted, biochar is now being implemented in the backfill of these areas in order to increase the porosity and the water holding and nutrient holding capacity of the soil overall. So this is not a new technology. This has been around since the dawn of agriculture, as communities throughout the world would slash and burn areas. The ash from that burn would be incorporated back into the soil in order to improve the fertility. This is a very similar product in that regard, that we would be taking wood waste that we're now accumulating in mass, put it through a system that would slowly burn it, but not turn it to ash. So it would hold the actual structure, the carbonic structure of the wood chips that can then be incorporated back into the soil after being inoculated with compost. So what I have here on this image, you can see the first image is a kind of the cycle that we pulled from Stockholm. So the plant waste would be collected, which at this point we are collecting in 2 designated areas in the city. It would be stored and dried to a certain percentage, and then it would be converted through the machine that you see here in this bottom picture, turned into biochar, and then distributed and applied to soil. And then the second picture that you see there is basically what would come out of what the end product looks like. So in one hand, you have the wood chips, in the other hand, you have biochar. So what is it used for? So right now we are producing roughly 20 to 30 yards of wood waste per week. And this is just in my office through our tree crews and our urban forestry crews. Currently, they are being stored at Mount Airy Forest at the end of Deal Road. There's a giant wood dump there that's been accumulating for years. Every 5 years, we have to bring in a tub grinder, grind this up, and take the material off site. The wood chips are also used in mulching of trees throughout the parks, and we also supply wood chips to community gardens. So with the implementation of this technology, we would be able to turn that wood waste directly back into a soil amendment that would increase the livability and the survivability of our young trees. So in review of our young tree planting program, I found that we are losing roughly 20% of the trees that we're planting street side. This is largely due to the fact that we have increased droughts through the summer, and just not having a good solid young tree program in place, where we're going back in and fertilizing trees for perpetuity within at least their first 5 years of life. So what this would do is it would allow us to basically close the loop on carbon sequestration of our urban forest. So as trees are storing carbon throughout their lifespan, as they are removed and taken down, we would be taking that woody debris and then turning it right back into a soil amendment, effectively capturing the carbon that the tree has stored and putting it right back into the soil. So beyond just the fact that we would be, alleviating a wood waste issue, we would also, and improving the soil structure of our urban tree planting program, we would also be closing that loop on carbon, which has the potential to be incorporated into a carbon sequestration program that we're also analyzing right now with the foundation and with the Office of Environmental Sustainability. So beyond the soil amending properties, we have also been in deep conversations, just started the conversations with MSD yesterday to talk about how this product could be utilized in stormwater retention objectives that they have in order to meet their consent decree. So it was a very encouraging program. They are actually seeking funding this year to do some sort of green infrastructure pilot projects, and thought that this would be a fantastic project to invest in. So with that, we're looking to potentially incorporate this into some of their best practices that they're trying to do on public and private property, as well as potentially partnering it with our relief program to really kind of turn this into a holistic public and private partnership for both the health of Canopy and for stormwater retention. So what does it look like? So after 3 months of review, we have been in deep dive looking at all the different technology that's out there. What we have here is the picture that I had showed in the previous slide. So basically the facility that the biochar would be processed through is about the size of a shipping container. It would have electricity and water hooked up to it. You would be dumping the wood debris into one side of it. It would be caught in a hopper and then processed through this slow burning pyrolysis machine that would then dump biochar out on the other side. So this particular machine can process 13 to 15 yards per day, which equates to 2 tons of biochar. So with that, we would essentially be taking all of the wood waste that we're producing in-house and be able to process it in one day. In addition to that, we could take in waste from other tree companies that are local, or even from our Duke contractors, or even our city contractors, to continue to produce as much biochar as possible. So with that, biochar has a value of $150 per yard. So there's also a potential for revenue generation if we get this pilot project up and moving, that we could actually sell the biochar that we're producing to pay for the operation of the facility. So beyond that, we've been looking at potential sites. We started with Warder Nursery, just because that area, we really started looking for areas that were underutilized in parks and that kind of already have a tie to either wood waste or plant production. So we started at Warder Nursery to try to analyze how we can incorporate this potentially into the greenhouse and improve kind of the whole system there. But the major challenge that we had was that in order for tree trucks to come in, they would have to go through a very tight residential street in order to get to the site. And then turning around there is relatively atrocious. So that site was pretty much out. We started looking at Sinton because that is where one of our smaller wood debris sites are. There is a push to kind of re-envision Sinton overall. There's a large operation that's taking place there. A major part of our East District is based out of Sinton. So as far as, trucks coming in and dumping and trying to do this whole process in that area, it's a viable site, but it's not the best. So then we look to Deal Road. So Deal Road, if you're not familiar, at the dead end of Deal, it meets Mount Airy Forest on the west side of I-74. There is an old CCC building there that has been relatively decommissioned, but the site still has water and electricity, and it's kind of a wide open space. So I think, yeah. So here's an image of kind of what we're looking at. So we would still be rolling through a residential street, but all the homes there are set back. No one's parking on the street. And the potential site for the facility that we identified is kind of in that in the middle where that blue box is. So this would provide a paved pathway to the facility, and then we could run electricity and water from there. So we have been working with Andy and his team with facilities to do this review, as well as Cindy and Steve, to make sure that it meets kind of those planning regulations and kind of the intent of our properties. And so this was identified as the best site on Park Board property. We took it the next step and reached out to city planning to ensure that we would, what kind of permits we would need, what kind of regulations we would have to be looking at. And they indicated that because it's on park property, we kind of have our own zone. So as long as the use of this facility was for the benefit of parks, that we would be pretty good as far as permitting goes from a planning standpoint, as long as the facility isn't placed on a within a hillside overlay area, which this is not. So the key reason I'm coming to you today is because we've gone through the first phase of this feasibility study with Bloomberg. We have another grant opportunity that is due on September 24th to continue to pursue the implementation process and review with experts to bring this project to life, as well as an opportunity for match funding from Bloomberg to actually fund the purchase of this facility and to get it up off the ground and running. So what I'm seeking from you today is approval to proceed and accept the funds from Bloomberg, depending on how they come back. And I would also like to seek support for an allocation of $100,000 from Urban Forestry's Fund 428. So this fund is a compensatory fund. It accumulates over time. It's basically as healthy trees are taken out of the system, are taken down by private property owners, they have to pay for the appraised value. This is the same process that we used for review of the trees at the Hollister property. The funds from that would go into Fund 428 as well. So we currently have a balance of about $230,000 in that fund. So I would be seeking approval to just at least make the statement that we could allocate directly from that fund in the amount of $100,000. And then from there, I would have to go through council to do the same. And then actually go through with the grant application, which is due on the 24th. So in addition to the $100,000, we have also secured a commitment from MSD up to $500,000 for this project as well. So they're willing to write a letter of interest that would go in with the grant application, identifying this as a priority for them as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you all for any questions, comments, concerns. And if Sam Dunlap isn't on the call yet, he may pop on. He has been our project lead for this. Sam is an expert in biochar production and is a local resident. He's very active in the urban ag community here in Cincinnati and turning, waste into a viable product for soil amendments.
Great. Thank you, Crystal, and welcome, Sam. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to open it up to see comments and questions from the commissioners. Who'd like to go first? Well, I'll jump in then, since I don't see people raising their hands. I had a few questions. Number one, I think this is a great project. I think it is something that is leading edge, and I really appreciate the work that's been done to this point. I'm a little fuzzy though on what the whole project is, from the standpoint that we're moving forward and we will get ourselves committed, but I don't understand completely what the project itself will entail. Meaning, we're looking here, I believe, to request and apply for $400,000 from Bloomberg. You're requesting a commitment from us for $100,000. You mentioned the $500,000 at MSD. I'm not sure what that is, but what is the total cost projected for this project? And then on an ongoing basis, I see two people that were in the pictures for the ongoing operation of this. what are we committing to long-term? What is the total project here? I would hate to send us down on a road where we're committing $100,000 and then find out later that, oh, by the way, on an ongoing basis to operate this until we generate revenue, it's going to cost us another $200,000 a year or whatever. So can you give us a little bit more meat to what this involves?
So in review of the technology, specifically the modular container that you had seen in that image, we have done a preliminary analysis with Artie, who is the company that would be providing this, this product. And to have the entire system completely automated with all the bells and whistles, including a grinding machine that would be built in, an automated system that would allow us to just kind of dump and then allow it to process through, we're looking at about a $700,000 piece of equipment. In addition to that, we would have to have funding that would allow for the electricity and water to be ran to the facility. So we're currently working with Andy to identify exactly what that would cost. The facility itself comes in on a semi, so it does have the potential to be moved. It does have the potential to be placed wherever we want it. Deal Road was specifically ideal because it has a nice flat surface. It has the roads already kind of running to it, and there's no operation taking place there. In addition to that, Sam has done some work to identify kind of what the annual operating cost of a facility like that would be. And if it was running, you know, kind of 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, then we're looking at about $100,000 per year. And I know Sam has been working diligently to identify not only additional funding to be pursued for the implementation, but also securing commitments from recipients of this material that would be interested in buying it in an amount up to $10,000 to $50,000 per year to supply their functions. And I can turn that over to Sam. He's done a great deal of work identifying who those potential purchasers would be.
Can folks hear me?
Good, Sam.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, well, I would say that $700,000 figure is total project cost. So that's inclusive of the equipment, but also the site preparation and other associated equipment. There's the unit itself, but then there's other pieces that need to be bolted on and, infrastructure to keep chips dry and that kind of thing. As far as, Crystal mentioned the operating cost annually, and I will say, Jim, just to address your concern about the timeline here and what are we committing to and the details. We are 3 months into this engagement with Bloomberg. The second round would be an additional 21 months. But they put the match funding request as both the requirement and, the kind of hoop to jump through at the front end of that engagement. So we would be working out all of the specific details of exactly how this thing operates in the subsequent months. That's just how their grant structure was put together. So we've been on a very compressed timeline to put the bones of the project together. But as far as how I think Crystal gave a good overview of the scope of the project for the purposes of how the biochar gets used within the Parks Department. MSD is interested. As she said, they're very interested in terms of improving stormwater infiltration. She mentioned, Mary Lynn Loader mentioned having spent $132 million so far on sewer backup prevention, and she said those are not actually preventative costs. It's just been dealing with sewage filled basements. So they're very, very interested in putting some money towards actual preventative measures. And they have money in their budget for undesignated green infrastructure projects or unspecified green infrastructure projects. And so they jumped at this because they need something to highlight in their budget proposal as far as what kind of green infrastructure projects are we talking about. So in addition to those internal city uses, we are pursuing both wholesale and some retail opportunities for biochar sales. I've got 2 compost companies who are highly interested in buying the biochar. And then we've been in conversation with the Cincinnati Zoo. They're working on a solution for their animal manure to turn that into a revenue stream. So we've talked about a co-product of their digestate plus biochar and kind of leveraging their marketing and PR fortitude to be able to have a revenue stream in collaboration with them.
Great.
I've got a few questions. How many, not in any particular order, but how many at 150 bucks per yard? How many yards would be in a ton?
The bulk density is roughly 200 to 250 pounds per yard. So that puts it at 9 to 10 yards per day of biochar.
Okay. From we don't have enough, we don't produce enough wood internally to justify it ourselves. So from a call it centralized location, is Deal Road going to, I understand it's ideal from the operational aspect of it. How about realistically from other tree companies, et cetera, driving to that facility and dropping their waste off? Is that fairly central, or is it, hey, you're only going to get a third of the community because nobody wants to drive 35 miles to drop off their wood waste?
I would say in my experience, we have beyond what we are producing in-house with our own teams, we also have up to 5 different contractors that are doing tree removal throughout the city for our preventative maintenance contract and our emergency maintenance contract. So I would say, in my opinion, that area would be ideal for anyone to dump that is doing work within the city.
So we could tap into our existing contractors and they would additionally supply. What does that, take the, the input up to above and beyond our own source of wood? I mean, I know it would be somewhat of a guess, but
I would say at minimum. Yeah.
It cut
I
out.
would say at minimum we would be doubling the amount that we're producing per week.
Okay. And what is it that
I would say at minimum we would be.
Okay. So we still need to have like a 5-day operation, although it doesn't necessarily have to be a 5-day operation, right? I mean, it could be a 2-day operation. Your annual operating costs are, minimized at that point. But, we just need to make sure that we've got critical mass of in-feed to justify it. I, again, like Jim, I'm excited about, I think this is a really fantastic product or project, developing great product. I guess the couple other questions I have is, what is it that MSD will do with this? Do they just incorporate this into backfill or something like that to help porosity, percolate the water into the ground, or how does this use to help facilitate their needs?
You want to take it, Crystal, or you want me to?
Either way, I would just say in our conversation from yesterday, MSD had identified that one of their greatest challenges is retention of stormwater on private property. So from my understanding, it would be a partnership with private property owners to incorporate this material into their landscape, ideally where they have the most stormwater coming and collecting in an area in order to increase the porosity of the soil, the urban soils and to hold the water on site before it reaches kind of those stormwater inlets.
Okay, so it's more of a detention kind of aspect to it.
Yeah, more of a retention. It would be retained on site and locked within that biochar, and also, you know, kind of communicated and incorporated as a way to improve folks' landscaping.
Okay, and then I was curious, for our use, or I guess anybody's use, you inoculate it with like a compost tea or something like that after it's been charred?
Yeah, there's a few different ways you do need to charge it with nutrients. So you could do that with compost tea. You can mix it directly with compost. And that's the typical, is to mix it at a rate between 10 and 20% biochar to compost. So we're exploring some partnerships on the compost side of this as well to meet that need. Okay.
And that would also be done the mixing would be done at the Deal Road facility as well then?
Potentially not. We have, once we've reduced the volume by so much, having turned it into char, it's not ideal to transport it long distances, but it could be moved to another location, within a relatively close distance. So we've been talking with a couple different potential partners who are in the compost business already as, partners to do that inoculation and mixing process.
Okay. Thank you. I think that's all the questions I have for now. But yeah, hey, to me, it's a really exciting, and I guess one last question is, if we continue to pursue this and ante up, does that mean we're in, that we're going to, we are going to be one of the 10 finalists or recipients of this, or is there some other hurdle that we're going to have to cross over?
I think the financial.
So in review.
Go ahead.
So it sounds like, from what we've heard from Bloomberg, is that 5 of the 10 cities will be chosen to proceed.
Okay.
And then you can go on, Sam.
Well, I was just going to say, having raised funds, they're going to look very favorably upon. They said they would include at least 5, at least half of those 10 cities. It seems that they want to include as many as have demonstratedly strong plans, I would say. So the pool has already been narrowed to 10, as of our application in March. So yeah, I don't know if they're looking at this as a tight competition or just an incentive to try to get as many of these cities with strong plans as possible. But it's been communicated to us that we're one of the stronger teams, and one of the strengths we have is our collaboration with Amy Townsend-Small, who's a climate scientist at UC, to do some greenhouse gas quantifications on this, as far as our carbon impact on the soil, and then also to measure our tree performance, both increased survival rates and growth rates as well.
Okay, thank you.
Linda or Molly?
I just, make a comment that I think that this really illustrates leadership by the parks. And, I would like to see a time when we're converting all of our waste to some form of energy. So I recognize that this investment, it really supports a long-term vision, and I'm really excited about it. So thank you for everything you've done to get it to this point.
Thank you, Molly. Linda?
I'd echo that. I am just excited about the science of this and how forward thinking it is. And for us to be in a position where we could take advantage of this or even implement this in our area. I was just had a few questions about what would ultimately make it feasible. I understand about how many people, the potential for more than 5 and all of that. But from our standpoint, if we think about the feasibility, the financial feasibility, what does that really look like? Does that mean that we would have to be producing for sale in order for it to be feasible for us to do? And if that's the case, then how much of that information ahead of time can we get as we're proceeding down this road? Sounds like there's opportunity, and but I think we just need to be clear about that. How much is it going to cost us going forward? And because it's not feasible to do if we're the only ones who are benefiting. The other one is a very practical question about Deal Road. I understand, I saw the map, that the houses are off the street. There's generally no parking on the street. But if we're talking about this as a, for lack of a better word, commercial operation now, because that's what's required to make it feasible, that means a lot more traffic is going to be coming down to deliver the raw material that is used in this process. So I think we have to think about those things holistically, so we don't want to get down the road and run into a problem with neighbors saying, hold up, you're bringing too many big trucks down the street. So there's some very practical things I think we need to work through. But in concept, I am just excited about this prospect and the fact that it's so forward thinking for us. And I think it would be great if we can work out all those details.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I was just going to address that, but go ahead, Jim.
No, go ahead, Sam.
On that, just the latter point, yes, I think the part of that ongoing, the 21-month engagement with Bloomberg, that would be what we're working through, those details and making sure that it all passes the test, that we've done our due diligence to make sure that it's being pulled off the right way. To your first point about feasibility, I think it really depends on how many internal city uses we identify and where those funds are coming from. If MSD is willing to, if they regard it as a successful project and want to invest more money towards it, that changes what that sales to internal use dial, what that balance looks like. But we're in the process of getting a more detailed economic analysis done by the manufacturer right now based on what we do know. And so the indications are that at the price that we've identified with the compost company that we've been talking to, it would be feasible today. But we need to iron through all the details.
Great. Well, that answers part of my question. Just again, going back to where are we in the process and where is the drop dead commitment date by the parks? I am willing to move forward, as I think I'm hearing from my colleagues here. This is a great opportunity. It's forward thinking. It is taking care of our environment. In the next 21 months, so as you're talking about, the next phase is 21 months. What I just want to make sure that as a board, we see before that equipment shows up on site and the front loaders are delivered on site to begin this project, that as you're developing the economics, that's shared with us.
Absolutely.
I think the $100,000 commitment is well worth the opportunity of looking into this and being part of a very exciting project. But I just want to make sure that before equipment arrives and we put it into operation, that you share with us just what the overall economic plan is and what the project plan looks like at that point.
Absolutely.
So if I'm not mistaken, then I think what you're looking for today, and correct me if I'm wrong, a commitment from this board so that you can evidence in the application process for the matching grant funding from Bloomberg that you have a commitment from the Cincinnati Park Board to commit $100,000 to this project. Is that what you're looking for?
And the approval to proceed with applying and accepting the grant when it comes in.
Okay. It does not, and again, I'll restate, it does not give you authority to put this into production at this point. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then I will submit make a motion that we approve a commitment for this project of $100,000, and also at the same time that funding be recognized as matching funds to meet the application process for the Bloomberg project. Does that make sense? Okay, so that I'll put that in the form of a motion then.
Jim, are you doing two motions or is that the final?
I think that's combined as one motion, that we will agree to make the application
Okay,
for the grant, and that if we are awarded, that we have committed to $100,000 for the project if awarded that grant.
okay, I missed the first part. So we're moving to apply and accept
Yes,
and approve the $100,000.
yes.
Okay,
Commit the $100,000 if we are granted or approved for this grant.
yes, thank you. I
So I'll put
second.
that- Okay.
I second that.
Linda. Any further discussion, Brad or Molly, on the motion?
No.
Mary, can we have a roll call, please?
President Getz,
Yes.
Vice President Thomas,
Yes,
Commissioner Castellini is not present, Commissioner Linder,
Yes.
Commissioner North,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you again. Again, this is an exciting project, and I think it does continue to put Cincinnati parks into a group of other park systems that is evidencing progressive thinking and creative ways of impacting and saving our environment. So thank you guys for your presentation, the time you've committed. We look forward.
One more question, can you just explain how we got into this in the first place? What was the genesis of this? Did you guys reach out? Did Bloomberg reach out? Was there a mass email that said sign up for this, or how did this unfold?
So I had been in conversation with Crystal and Ollie Kroner at the at Office of Environment and Sustainability separately about just my efforts to do small scale biochar production and where we might be able to include that in city projects. And that was a pretty, I'd say a snail pace conversation. And then through Ollie's participation in the Urban Sustainability Directors Network, there's a particular cohort that's focused on carbon mitigation projects. And there was an RFP from Bloomberg that hit his desk through that network. So it provided a very large catalyst to accelerate our conversation and start getting real with some plans.
Great.
There's and a couple of just other interesting tidbits. Carbon credits are a possibility in this to generate revenue that way. And this thing is modular. So within that same shipping container, you can have one pyrolysis train, or you can add up to 4 more. So as far as being able to scale it, there is that possibility within the same footprint without a whole ton more investment.
Great. Kudos to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you again, and thanks for your work on it. We look forward to hearing some more progress. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to move on. The next item, Kara, you've got approval of some contracts or a contract.
Yes, Mary's just going to present the contracts, which are over $50,000 in front of you today.
For your consideration this morning is one contract that exceeds the $50,000 threshold that requires your approval. That is for the Prismatica exhibit at Crone Conservatory, which is colorful tall prisms that will complement the the summer and fall 2022 show, which is called The Science of Color. And I can just open it up for questions. I believe Mark House is on the call for any questions you may have.
Yeah, thank you for being with us, Mark. When Mark presented to you a couple months ago, he mentioned this opportunity. We talked about the revenue generation opportunities that this will present to us. And so it's just the time that it's in front of you. We're available for questions.
My only comment is it sounds like a cool addition to the Crone programs. I would be fully supportive of this and appreciate your creativeness and the idea. It sounds like a very neat way to bring interest to the Crone Conservatory. Anybody else? Linda, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I that was exactly the word I was going to choose. I think this is really cool. Is this installation outside?
It is entirely inside of the Crone Conservatory.
Entirely inside.
It'll be the first
Interesting.
time it's ever been on display inside a building. And
I know the pictures suggested it was outside, so I was just wondering about that. I think it's great.
Any other questions? I don't want to spoil the effect of rolling this out when it's going to be installed and rolled out. I think it's going to be a great opportunity to market the Crone. So any other questions regarding this contract itself?
Do we have a sense that the uptick in attendance will cover the expense for this? Or is this just, half of it will be covered and the other half is marketing for Crone and just and bringing in maybe another crowd that hasn't come in previously?
Mark, would you like to speak to the conversations you've had with our CFO?
yes, I've considered the bottom line very carefully. The income is important, the revenue, the self-sustainability. Crone Conservatory does not take any money from the 050, the public funds. All of our budget is determined by sales at the door and gift shop sales. So I'm very aware of the income and the revenue. And in addition to being quite relevant and keeping the conservatory fresh in Cincinnati parks popular, it does have the potential to generate quite a bit of revenue. And what we looked at, and I'm always very conservative about this, if I could show you very carefully, right here. This is, if you can see this, we track all of our attendance and revenue. The last normal year that we had was 2019. And the summer show, it has always been kind of a drop in attendance and revenue after the butterfly show, which of course is our big blockbuster. So I wanted to change that, and Prismatica and the Color of Science is an attempt to do that. And I spoke with Jenny Mobley and our CFO, Craig Sherman, to make sure that I had all my bases covered when I invited Prismatica to come to Cincinnati. This is the first time they've ever come here. And it looks like conservatively, we could generate 60,000 in attendance, which would generate 300,000 in income. And that's conservative. Of course, the butterfly show comparatively is 96,000 and 450,000 in revenue in 2/3 of the time. So I'm pretty confident that we can do this.
Thank you, Mark. From my perspective, and you hardly hear this hardly ever hear this from a financial guy, but something like this is more than just the bottom line. And I appreciate your focus on that. But the Crone is one of our gems in our system. And I really appreciate you and your team, Mark, coming up with creative ways to keeping it fresh, continuing to make it one of the key draws for this region, to bring people into Cincinnati and to share Cincinnati parks. So I think it's a great opportunity. I'll be fully in support. Any other input from commissioners?
I would just say, echo Jim's comment that even if we don't pay for it entirely, I think it's a really good move on your part to kind of mix up the programming to generate additional visitors into the Crone at kind of the off season, if you will. And to, as Jim said, highlight, one of the outstanding gems in the city. So fully supportive, exciting.
So I assume, Brad, is that a motion to approve this contract?
I will move to approve it. Yes.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Linda. We have a motion and a second, barring other discussion. Mary, can you do a roll call, please?
President Getz,
Yes.
Vice President Thomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Lindner,
Yes. Sorry.
thank you. Commissioner North,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you so much. And again, thank you, Mark and Kara, for leadership on this. I think it's a great opportunity, and I look forward to hearing more about it and the excitement that you're gonna draw to this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Kara, we're going to move on to the last in our action items, and that's approval of in-kind contributions. Can you take this for us?
Yeah, no presentation intended. We are available to answer any questions that you have. This is a standard approval that you do every quarter. We do have Patricia Thompson, our senior accountant, here if you have any questions.
Perfect. My only comment is continued appreciation for the work that the Cincinnati Parks Foundation does. This is $50-some thousand in-kind contributions coming from the foundation for their ongoing support of our programs and work in the park. So I have no other questions. Any other questions or comments from the commissioners?
I'll move to accept the in-kind contributions.
Thank you, Brad. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you, Linda. Molly, any questions?
No questions.
Mary, can you do a roll call here, please?
President Getz,
Yes.
Vice President Thomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Lindner,
Yes.
Commissioner North,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And again, thanks to our partners at the foundation. Kara, you want to head us into our next discussion phase here?
Yes, thank you so much. I have asked our Division Manager of Natural Resources, Crystal Courtney, and our friend, advocate, ally, partner, Tanner Yes from Ohio Groundworks River Valley, to join us today to talk to you about the conclusion, what we were able to achieve this year with our youth employment program. So Crystal and Tanner, love a brief presentation from you about what you were able to achieve this summer.
Thank you, Kara. I have put together a slideshow. I'm going to kind of rush through it and open up the room for communication here. Let's see. All right, so I'm here to give you a brief overcap of what we had accomplished this year with our Greenleaf team. So here's an image from our Mount Airy team looking through the hole of a tree from one side to the other. Love this picture. So essentially what we did this year was we took our Greenleaf program, which had typically been about 20 youth employees that would be picking up trash or mulching trees around the parks, and decided to partner with Groundwork Ohio River Valley to turn this into a real job training endeavor focused around the green industry and natural resource management. So with that, we had 10 youth leaders from Tanner's team and 5 to 10 support staff from his team, which are just phenomenal community builders and really have created this excellent program called the Green Team, where they not only are doing job training, a lot of these kids, it's their first job. They have the responsibility to get to the site and be professional throughout the day, but also have this whole enrichment aspect to it, which I'll get into on the next slide. So we had about 48 youth employees. We ended up clearing 13 acres of invasive species. We participated in over 40 hours of development training and 3 certifications is what these kids are walking away with, restored a mile of trail, and overall had 60 days of fun in the sun in the woods. So some of the enrichment days, I tried to just throw as many photos on here as possible because I think it really tells the story of kind of what these kids are getting to experience. So in partnership, Tanner's team took the kids to the Cincinnati Zoo, the Museum Center, Thomas More Field Station, as well as doing in the field training on water quality assessment, plant ID, and then just general life skills. So I'm going to go through what we did this year. We had 5 teams of 10, and each team had 2 youth leaders. We were focused in 4 different areas throughout the park board and the community. So we were able to take this team and not only work in Cincinnati parks, but also continue to work on some of the good projects that Groundwork Ohio River Valley had already had in place. So this is an image of our Aiken team. So this is a partnership that continued from the spring of this year in partnership with Aiken High School. They basically built a trail that goes into Greeno Woods. So it connects the high school into this nature preserve. And with that, they also cleared honeysuckle and restored and created trails into Greeno and within Greeno. So great team there. We had our Mount Airy team. So on this one, we actually had 2 teams of 10, so 20 youth employees and 4 youth leaders. And they did a heck of a job. So cleared 10 acres of honeysuckle and invasive species, restored the trail throughout that area. And they also installed some of the fencing that we've been talking about to try to keep cars out of our playground areas. So they restored the fencing at the park across the street from everybody's treehouse. We had a Mount Echo team. So they did a pretty good amount of work as far as like invasive species removal and restoration of the very small trail system at Mount Echo. But this team really focused efforts in Lower Price Hill, which is near the Groundwork Ohio River Valley's headquarters. So working with the schools, several school sites and CRC sites down there to build out community gardens and just kind of restoring an area of the city that is relatively depleted of any kind of, recreational amenities. We had our Little Duck Creek and Drake Park Madisonville team. So again, this team did some work in Drake. They did some restoration work along Little Duck Creek's trail system, but they also spent a good bit of time working at the greenhouse that Groundwork Ohio River Valley runs out of Madisonville. So really got in tune with what it takes to actually do plant production, vegetable production, and greenhouse operations and maintenance. And then at the end of the season, there's a handful of kids from each team so that actually get to go out to Yellowstone and work at the national park level to take their experience from this season to that next step. And this image here is actually of the team that went out from Cincinnati with the Secretary of Interior, Deb Haaland, that, really kind of transformative, experience that I'll definitely turn over to Tanner to talk a little bit more about once I get through the end here. So moving forward into 2022, our goal, we learned a lot this year. So we kind of, Jim Burkhart had been running this program in the past. It was turned over to me in January. Tanner and I kind of, rushed to kind of get this together. So some of the things that we really want to look at next year, now that we have, kind of a year to work on, is streamlining the funding issues that we ran into. This is kind of a pass-through program from CRC to parks. So really looking at kind of what our opportunities are to know what our budget is on the front hand and really get a contract in place that outlines everything that we're doing. We also want to increase the number of youth employees for the program overall. What we found is that in Mount Airy, by having 2 teams, they were very competitive. And so they cleared a lot more area and just did a lot of work, just, kind of with that competition and camaraderie. Our goal is to continue with the DNR efforts that we identified this year. So we would have the teams go back and kind of do some follow-up treatment on the areas that they have cleared, and then also work to expand this through other opportunities throughout parks. So really working with Crone and Explore Nature to see, what other areas we can plug youth employees into to give them a kind of a well-rounded experience on what it actually takes to maintain parks and operations. And that's what I have. So I'll open it up to any questions.
I'd love to hear from Tanner real quick.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. Thank you,
What was your
Crystal.
experience working with us for the first time?
I just want, Crystal laid it out there perfectly. I want to thank Karen, Crystal, and their teams and the whole Cincinnati Park Board just for being so bold. This was super ambitious. Of course, there were all sorts of hiccups along the way, but in less than a year, we created one of the nation's largest green youth workforce programs. And we know that because of our 21 city network. Yeah, it's super cool. And just to put it in a framework, you know, we look at artworks and the murals around town, and we wanted to bring that same strength on strength with our young people in the parks, in public land. So it worked amazingly well, given all that we did in a short amount of time. And again, Crystal summed it out perfectly. So thank you, everybody, especially Karen, Crystal, and their teams. And I'll step back for any questions.
Tanner, you and your team were brilliant. It's a pleasure to work with you this summer.
Tanner, thank you for joining us. And Crystal, that was a great overview. Any questions or comments by the commissioners?
I mean, I just want to give the maximum amount of accolades to this effort. I agree with you. What we've seen over a couple of decades, the Artworks has delivered, has accomplished so many things. It's beautified our city and given youth new employment opportunities that they may never have. And we're seeing the same tangible results from Groundworks. It is just awesome. And Tanner, I would tell you that there is an unlimited amount of work available for you. And I'm just thrilled about this. I just spoke with the folks at MabTree last week, who also just, talked about how significant of a contribution Groundworks is making to the Cincinnati parks and their commitment to your success as well. So congratulations on this success, and we're just excited to see more.
Yeah, I would just add, great job. I know you guys do tremendous work above and beyond just what you guys do for the city parks. So I think you got a great formula, and it's I think exciting to see you guys get the youth of America out in the woods and actually engaging in a little sweat and hard work and getting some real contribution to the community. So awesome job, Tanner. Thanks.
Thank you both. Yeah.
And I just want to say the same thing, really. It's phenomenal, I think. Giving these kids an opportunity they might not otherwise have, and making memories they won't forget. I mean, to meet the Interior Secretary, I think that's a big deal. And that's gonna be very impressive for them going forward. Great work. I'm just excited about where you're gonna go from here.
And I'll just chime in as well. I think that besides the improvements and the work that you did for Cincinnati Park, the impact on these kids that participated, I think, is something well beyond any other program that we do in the Cincinnati Park. So I really want to thank you, Tanner, and Crystal, for your leadership in this area. I think it really makes an impact, and this is what Cincinnati Parks are about. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's our great honor.
Perfect. Well, Kara, we'll move on then in our agenda and turn it over for you for staff comments.
Yep, we're going to begin our conversation today with a presentation by Kelly Pillar, who's representing the Division of Communications, Engagement, and Volunteers. Kelly, thank you for being with us today. Tell us what's going on in the parks.
Good morning, everyone, and good morning, commissioners. Mary has a couple of photos for you while I read comments. It's a pleasure to be joining you today. I have 4 items to note. Firstly, our summer season is ending, and we are pleased Cincinnati Parks produced or hosted 426 events so far, ranging from community events like Rapid Run Canoe and Movie Night to the Sawyer Point Concert Series. The Special Use Department and our Riverfront team deserve so much credit for organizing the sudden wave of events requests that we received this year, as people were excited to get back outdoors, to get back to their community, to get back out in parks. Secondly, Crone Conservatory's Butterflies of Bali is in its final weeks, ending on September 6th. We encourage people to buy tickets online or to show up in person at the door to purchase tickets. Be on the lookout for the upcoming Crone show, Mounds of Mums, opening September 18th. Thirdly, as you know, we've had much to celebrate because Tom Jones Commons in Eden Park and the PNC Grow Up Great Playground in Inwood opened up to the public. Several of you attended, and we thank you so much for going to those dedications. These community assets bring new features, including wetlands, natural playscapes, Eden Park's only picnic shelter, accessible walkways, and an accessible playground for all children. We thank Tom Jones, the PNC Foundation, and the Cincinnati Parks Foundation for making all of this possible. And lastly, our Natural Resource Division completed the 2021 Tree Canopy Census. With this data, we are able to perform a targeted marketing campaign to priority neighborhoods in the city with less than 40% tree canopy coverage for our fall relief program. The fall relief program, the online applications open this Saturday at 8 a.m. to the mentioned priority neighborhoods. Applications open to all City of Cincinnati residents by September 4th. Very much aware the community knows about this. We went to Paddle Fest. We got several comments of people putting in their calendars already to wake up at 8 a.m. on a Saturday. We'd like to thank Mad Tree Brewing, Macy's, and the Cincinnati Parks Foundation for sponsoring the Cincinnati Parks Fall Relief year. Thank you. That concludes the staff comments. Try to keep it condensed for you. Do you have any questions? Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Kelly.
This has been a real feel-good meeting, Jim, Sarah, all. No question. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.
I would like to add on to the staff comments today and a personnel matter to formally report to the board that Division Manager Stephen Schuckman has submitted his application for retirement. I just wanted to inform you today that I have signed that documentation and will continue to keep you informed of any future discussions. So thank you.
Thank you, Kara. Yeah, barring any other questions that commissioners might have of you, I know on our authorization and approval policy that anybody reporting to you requires the board to approve. So I think you can assume from a board standpoint, your approval to sign whatever documentation you need to, and appreciate your updates. And thank you again, Kelly, for the input of what's going on with your in your group. So thank you.
Shout out to the green team. I wanted to thank them too. That was excellent.
Recording in progress.
Sorry about I'm having technical difficulties here, so there we go. Sorry. I've been technically challenged this morning with my system, so thank you for bearing with me. Okay, we're going to move on to then commissioner comments. So this is an opportunity. I do want to say that as a public body, we are restricted, as you know, to have discussions together as a commission only in public meetings. So I know there's a lot going on, and I want to make sure that this is a time, and in this section of our meeting, that if there's any updates you need or discussions on topics that are impacting the park board, that this is an opportunity for us to be able to talk to each other and to share thoughts and discussion on these topics. So I'll open it up to commissioners. Any input that or topics you'd like to discuss?
Could we have an update on where the boat dock is?
Yes, I can provide that. So we have received the best and final offers from the vendors that have submitted their proposals. Those offers have gone to DEI for approval, and as of Tuesday, they have been reported upon. The committee that is meeting on looking at those proposals are reviewing what was their best and final offers, and we are getting together, I believe next Monday it is, to discuss the advantages and disadvantages for the city. So we will have a conclusion soon.
And
So
go
does that mean that the best and final offers potentially could be rejected and we don't have a boat dock? That's, I guess, a potential outcome.
No, what we are doing is just reviewing what those best and final offers are to see which one is most advantageous for the city.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
And in the process, has the park board received copies of the two proposals to know what's even being proposed for these boat docks?
Not that I am aware of. I would need to determine if that is something that could happen prior to our discussion, which I am not sure that that is a possibility to do so. So I would need to look further into that.
Yeah.
So I guess we don't really have much of a say in this process then, huh?
Well, what our goal is to look at those proposals and bring forward to you what our recommendations are so that you can then review what our recommendations are and why we made that recommendation. And at that point, I believe what your job will be is if you would like to accept our recommendation or or I don't want to say throw out or start the process over, I should say.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to thank Jenny for you've done your very best job there summarizing where we are, but in the current process that we are following, everything that Jenny has said is accurate. Jenny currently is the only employee who has seen those proposals and is actively participating in a small committee to provide direct input for both you and for the city manager. So under the current approach that's being taken, Jenny has done a very good job summarizing the steps that have been taken.
Molly, did you have, I saw you unmuted.
No, I don't have any comments. It doesn't sound like there are any questions that can be answered about the bids. So I really don't have any questions.
Do we have clarity why the park board does not have copies of the proposals? It seems backwards from what has typically been the process that we've taken, that proposals are brought to the park board so that we can see the various, at this point, we don't even know what is being proposed. So typically we review proposals and make a recommendation, and then it goes for approval from the city procurement process. Is there a reason why we don't have copies of the proposal to look at before it goes all the way to the city manager for approval?
Typically in an RFP situation, there is an evaluation committee that reviews the proposals before they're even brought forth. All that information is kept confidential for that review. And then once that review has taken place, then the recommendation then would come forward. So we are still in that confidential status in reviewing what the proposals are with the evaluation committees. So therefore, that's why you have not seen the proposals at this point. You will have the opportunity to see and review those proposals once we have evaluated and made our determination of who's most advantageous for the city.
So those are not public documents once those proposals are received? And I see Kelly Carr's on here. You may have some input for that. Kelly, how are you? Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, not while it's an active procurement. I mean, once there's an actual award recommendation and the vendors have been notified, I think in this situation, because it's a, the DEI did initially reject because neither vendor had met inclusion by law. I think there's an opportunity here for the smaller committee to make its recommendation to the board, and there could be even opportunity for those respondents to maybe in an executive session present to you to be able to make your the park board a recommendation to the city manager for final award. So. But until that, it's not really an out public, but I think that there's an opportunity by the city manager's discretion to allow some engagement with the respective respondents. But we would like to have the committee first, show you our recommendation and why we have come to the conclusion that we have. And then, you can potentially engage directly with those respondents.
Hey, I have two questions, one for Jenny and one for Kelly, and I'll ask them both and then turn it over. Jenny, my question for you is, where are we on timing? I mean, obviously we as commissioners get questioned about the status of this, and it's taken an extended period of time, and we'd like to be responsive to those interested in the boat dock. And then Kelly as well, I know that there's some training out there for us, especially new commissioners. And one thing I'd like to understand is this DEI by law stuff, because I know that we're getting hung up on it quite a bit. And I'm just trying to understand what the requirements are, the limitations, so that when we get hung up on these things that are extending it way beyond our understanding, that we know and understand why. So those are my questions.
Okay, I will take a stab at the first one. We're pushing very hard to get a recommendation to you for this meeting. However, with the proposals and everything coming in on Tuesday, we started our review and decided that we were not comfortable with gathering all those details in order to bring that to you to this board meeting. So I do apologize for the maybe 1 month more delay, or maybe a special session that we may need to enter into. We certainly were trying to meet the deadline to get it here today. But as we started communicating about what those proposals look like and the final offers on Tuesday, when we were able to review them again, it just seemed a little rushed. And we were afraid we weren't going to make a very good, solid recommendation for you. So we are taking these next few days to individually review them and get all our pros and cons or advantages together. And then we are going to convene on Monday to make that determination of where we would like to go. At that point, we can request a special session because I realize that, yes, this has been on our plates for a very long time, and we are trying to make sure we wrap this up. So
Jenny, let me ask, the proposals came in at the end of June, is that correct?
That is correct. And then it went to DEI.
And so where are we in that process? So the proposals came in the end of June, they went to DEI. Did DEI approve them?
DEI at that time rejected them because neither one of them met the qualifications. So then at that point, it was determined that
the city manager for her discretion. And so basically when it was thrown out, it was given to the city manager. She could potentially through the charter, do a direct award. And so she wanted to present it to a small committee who are previous wharf masters, such as Jenny and myself, who are very familiar with like a head boat and dock situation to sort of review and negotiate with both vendors for a best and final. We have done that. We hope to have a recommendation to you within the next 2 weeks. I anticipate if you are in agreement or in hearing directly from the respondents that, we find one who is most advantageous, you most likely can do contract negotiations and, by, probably end of September, October. And so you could do spring, construction over the winter and spring, and next season have a marina if everything works out.
Sounds good, Kelly. Let's get that boat open.
Yeah, I mean, Jenny and I both are very familiar with, the head boat operation. I mean, I don't think that when we sit down and go through it and we present to you that you're going to see our recommendation as being completely left field. I think when we get through and we see the numbers, we're definitely going to do what's most advantageous for the city and for the park board and where the numbers fall and how the operation will work.
Jenny and Kelly, for me, that's all very helpful. That's all very helpful. I think I understand clearly where we are and when we will have some transparency on next steps.
Yeah.
So then, Kelly, could you speak to the DEI by law component? I'm very familiar with best efforts.
Yeah.
But this is very different from best efforts.
Yeah, so we do have a boards and commissions academy that typically covers law, budget, and finance. And having seen many boards and commissions like yourself struggle to understand the law as it relates to inclusion and the difference between, who is certified, who is not certified, how inclusion goals are set. There's a lot of questions. So we have now added the Department of Economic Inclusion to that boards and commissions academy. And so there are dates this fall. We have a September, October, November date. I will get that over to Kara to send out to all of you. Encourage that you sign up and you get that training. It's a good time. You get to hang out with me and a bunch of other folks from law and finance. It's a good time.
Okay, any other questions on boat dock? Brad, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I'll just share, I'm not a fan of the process. I feel like we're just rubber stamping something and ultimately our choice is going to either be to accept what's presented to us or delay it further. So, I mean, but I get it. And that's what we got to deal with. So yeah, my questions have been answered.
Thanks, Brad. And just for full disclosure, the city manager has agreed to sit down and meet with us. Brad, I'm going to touch base with you to see if you can join us for that meeting. Also with procurement to talk through this process. Because you're right, I had the same reaction that this seems to take the decision-making away from the park board and place it in the city administration hands for a park. But that's what we will discuss face-to-face with the group in the city hall.
I look forward to joining you.
Thank you, Brad. I'll give you the info.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions, comments, issues from board members? I would like to provide just a discussion on lot 28.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Excuse me. I just wanted to make sure that we do get the information on DEI because that was a fundamental question I had because that seems to trip us up all the time. So a better understanding that would be most helpful. So if we can make sure we get the information about when that training is available.
Absolutely. Thank you, Linda.
Thanks.
I just wanted to touch base on lot 28. As you know, lot 28 is one of the last lots as part of the Smail Riverfront Park. Under the agreements, the bank's agreements that we had, that was going to be a Cincinnati Park location. The process that we're at now, where we stand, is that the city and county are in negotiations on lot 28, where 28 would be developed by the county. The county would pay for development of lot 28. It would then become a county lot versus a Cincinnati Park lot, and they would be responsible for the ongoing programming, maintenance, etc. for that lot. So I wanted you to be aware of that. We are working with the law department has forwarded to us for review some of the documentation that will be required to affect that change and affect that approach with lot 28. But that's where we are, and just wanted to see if anybody had questions on that.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Linda.
I just wanted to understand what brought this change, and do you have any indication as to what they would intend to do there?
What I can tell you is this has not been brought up. The only input that we've had to date was we did get contacted by the law department that documents were being drafted. So from my perspective, that's the input that we've had. Under the draft documents that I've seen, there is supposed to be attached to those agreements copies of the design, what will be there. It's my understanding that in this on lot 28 will be the Cincinnati Black Music Hall Walk of Fame would be put on lot 28. Again, we have not seen what those plans are, what the designs are, but as to what triggered this, I am not sure. It's not been discussed, so I don't know. All that I have is notification from the law department that these documents are being drafted.
So Jim, was this park property or was this always county property that was going to be dedicated, turned over to park property?
It's the latter, Brad. It is county excuse me, each of the lots in the Banks project, my understanding is it's county property, and then once developed, so for example, lot 23 still hasn't been finalized. The deed hasn't been changed, so to speak. So 23, as we sit today, is still owned by the county, but because of all the documentation, everything was written, and it will be transferred to the city as park property once those final documents are signed. What the intent in the joint banks agreement initially was that 28, the same process would take place, that it would be developed by the city as a park, and then once completed would be deeded over. The air rights, they break the lot into two. The lower portion remains a county parking area, and the upper portion becomes whatever the intended purpose was. So that was intended to be a city park. My understanding, it will continue to be a park, but it'll just still remain with the county.
Okay, thank you.
Kara, can you bring us up to date also on status of District 5? I know that the Park Board approved in October of 2020 the sale of park property on Reading Road, that CDC, too many D's and C's. The CDC is purchasing our property and to develop a new CDC headquarters there in Cincinnati. We approved a resolution in our October meeting that said we approved the sale contingent upon Park Board receiving proceeds from that property as well as an adjacent property. Can you tell us where we stand in this whole movement of our operations from Reading Road to District 5?
Sure. And a third component of your approval at that time was also the difference in allowing for us to successfully move from our current location to another location. So there were three components. The conversation has advanced. I will do my best to capture it because I am not the entity that's negotiating on behalf of Parks. That is being handled through the city manager's office. Specifically, Billy Weber is kind of the point person for these conversations. It has been brought to my attention that an update to the agreement has been brought to the city's attention, where rather than a 21 month from signing timeline, they are targeting a December 31 of 22 date for vacation from the current facility. So originally it was supposed to be a clock of 21 months for us to vacate began on the day of signing. And now the request is for a date of December 31st to 2020. This would significantly reduce our ability to get out of the facility. However, I have reiterated what the board's wishes were with the city manager's office in those discussions that I've been having with them. So what we are doing right now is to actually try to figure out what that difference is. As you stated, we have asked the city for approval on not only the proceeds of sale from our property, but the proceeds of sale from the additional city property. And then the third component, which is the additional dollars. So we are proceeding and trying to figure out exactly what those additional dollars will be. My communications with Billy Weber and the city manager's office are that we are working on that. We have had a series of a couple of meetings with the contractor that you approved previously. If you'll remember, it was a contract for several $100,000. You approved a portion of that. I think it was in the $56,000 range, somewhere around there. I apologize, I don't have that in front of me. But our team has had a series of meetings with them to determine if when we relocate to the former District 5, that X amount of work would need to be done, and there's an X dollar number associated with that. We will have that cost estimate. I will have that cost estimate in hand by September 30th to deliver to the city manager's office. And at that time, it really becomes the effort of the city manager's office to craft an ordinance that per your wishes, meets those three criteria that you had previously stated. This is not a done deal. The city manager only has, in her office, only has so much power in this specific situation. An ordinance will need to go through, pass through council for the dollars. So in terms of continued participation from the board, we want your continued advocacy on this, but from the staffing perspective, we are working on finalizing that budget number. Previously, we only had an estimate of around the $3 million or just over mark. And Jenny has done a significant amount of effort working with the city's public services department in order to allow us to potentially move our mechanics operations into one of the current city garages, which will save us at least $500,000. So we are doing our very best efforts to come up with a not an extravagant, but a real price tag for what it will cost us to relocate. And hopefully in the next several months that this is able to play out, including a recommendation from the city manager's office to council, council approval, and an official document. What we would do, we would not be prepared in terms of completion of construction. We would not be prepared to enter our new facility on that date of December 31st. But in very active conversations I've had with Crystal and her team for the Division of Natural Resources, we will figure out how to temporarily stage our operations so that we can complete construction and then enter the facility when it is ready for us.
So Kara, did I understand that you guys are going to separate the maintenance, the fleet maintenance function from the rest of the activities, kind of on a permanent basis, that we're just going to split it apart then?
Yeah, that's our intention. Not only does it save us $500,000 in construction, but to be side by side with the rest of the fleet services in the city, I think is good for business.
Yeah, no, I would agree. That's a great solution. So we've gone basically from 21 months to move in, to construct and move into, what is it, 12 months now that we have?
Currently like 13 or 14, and that will continue to shrink as the signing date gets further and further out. But I have, in my conversations with the city manager, the assistant city manager, Billy Weber, have been that if we are able to fully secure the funding resources that we require, we will make it work. And again, that's just coordinating temporary staging of our operations throughout our entire system to accommodate the current operations, again, in a temporary manner.
Okay.
Thank you. Can you give us an update on Owl's Nest that had some public input there? Where are we with that process?
Sure, thank you. Where we are right now is we are scheduling another meeting with community representatives. We had a first meeting, which was to, once we put a pause in the demolition of the site, we had a first meeting with community representatives, really just to reestablish our relationship with the community as it pertains to not only this park, but this site specifically. That is that at that time, we intended to invite them to a secondary meeting. We are currently finalizing when that meeting date is. The sole purpose of this next meeting is going to be to discuss the programmatic needs of the site. So speaking with the community about what they need, which is really a precursor to determining what occurs with the facility itself. So do they need space for concerts? Do they need restroom facilities? What are the programmatic needs of the community? That's what we will seek to accomplish in the next meeting. And then once we are able to bring an architect onto our team, they will participate in active discussions with the community, facilitating those community discussions to determine what the right solution is for us in terms of the Owl's Nest Pavilion itself.
Super. Just go ahead, Brad.
Well, it just seems to me that the wishes of the community are going to have to be balanced with the resources to deliver those wishes. And I think at some point we need to, and I know we had committed a certain amount of money to deconstruct the facility. So I would just suggest that, maybe in parallel that the community start to be thinking or engaging in some kind of fundraising, because again, we're not Santa Claus. We're happy to participate, but I think these things are much better with a partnership approach. So depending on what they really want from this facility, I think is going to be somewhat critically dependent upon what their ability to help fund those desires. I mean, I would be happy to, commit to a certain amount of that, but I know we don't have the coffers to satisfy everybody's needs. So
well, if I could, let me interject here. A couple things that are important. Perhaps it was 5 years ago. I'm not sure the last time that this was done, but community people raised significant funds to redo Owl's Nest Park. So there was a high level of public philanthropy and monies that were raised to put into Owl's Nest Park. Those same community leaders who raised those funds, and we're talking millions of dollars, are engaged in this and are committed to working through with parks what is the best solution for Owl's Nest, for that building specifically. So these are community people who have in the past worked very hard to raise funds necessary to do what has been done in Owl's Nest. And there is a commitment already from this group. And in fact, it was this group, that group of philanthropy, some people that are donors, I'll use that word, that's easier for me. It was that group of donors that brought this to our attention, that they were concerned about the demolition of that building. So I think you're absolutely correct, Brad. I think we've started down a road of collaboration with the community to determine what is the best path forward in relation to that structure that we have there, and then working with them on how we make it work, whatever it is that we develop going forward to meet the needs of the community there.
Yeah, I have full faith and confidence in that group to rise to the occasion. I know that there's a lot of, emotion and support around that. So yeah, it's good to hear that they're already kind of got the wheels in motion.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And there's been other discussions. I know Commissioner North has had some discussions on potential opportunities for that park. So I think we've got a good collaboration moving forward. I just wanted you all to be aware of that, since it was something that was brought to our attention in the public, so that you're aware where we are with that. The last thing that I had is I just want to make you aware too that I was contacted directly by Channel 9 that was interested in doing a story about parks. And Crystal mentioned earlier in the meeting about cars driving through playgrounds in our parks. And evidently this has gotten the attention of at least one television station. So I just wanted you to be aware that there was potentially a story going to be written about safety issues in our park from the standpoint of vehicle traffic in the parks, as well as other issues of safety and litter and a few other things, but just wanted you to be aware of that.
President Gibbs, I would add to that I'm very proud of the work that our team is doing to really scour the parks, look for current issues, to propose to me potential environmental solutions that are going to accommodate for this. And all of that is just over and on top of the partnerships that they've created with CPD and other user community groups to try and tackle these needs. If every system that I'm connected with in the country of different leaders, this will forever be a topic of discussion, is mitigating the impacts of users who don't use our parks the way that we would like them to. But at this very moment, I think the strength of the partnerships and the commitment from our team under Jenny's leadership to look for those environmental changes that can be made, I think we are going to make a dramatic impact over a short amount of time on some of the most pressing matters of the moment.
That's great. And just for full clarity, I did not make any statements, but I did relay to the reporter that Parks had been engaged directly with the CPD and working through, as we discussed earlier, and I directed those inquiries to you, as you know, Carrie, you and Jenny and Rocky. So I appreciate you handling that. I just didn't want anybody surprised if there's a story run on one of the television stations, but I feel confident that the work Jenny and Rocky are doing, as well as you, Carol, with CPD and addressing these issues are right down the road where we should be. That's the end of my list here. Any other questions, comments, or input from commissioners for the good of the organization?
I would just like to commend the staff on all the great work they've done. I think Molly hit the nail on the head. This was a feel-good meeting. I mean, it's really exciting to see some of these, call it leading edge endeavors going on out there. And, the work that Tanner and his group has done. I think this is really, kind of a really good example of the creativity, the leadership, and the hard work that you guys put. So hats off.
Thank you. It's really just the start. This team, we've had so many conversations about not only engaging in best practices, but next practices. Like this is, we've got a very dynamic team that works together, and you are absolutely spot on that this team is rocking it. They're stellar, and I'm fortunate to work with them. We're all fortunate to have them, and yeah, just the beginning, everyone.
Thanks, Linda. Did you have any input?
Yes, and I really like that last comment. This is just the beginning. I wanted to commend staff on just the last month or so of our ribbon cuttings. They have been fantastic. I think they've been well publicized and the turnout has been great. So well handled for some really great additions to our parks. And what I have appreciated is I have gone to them since the ribbon cutting several times just to see how they look and what's going on. And I'm delighted every time. I go to Tom Jones Commons frequently, and it's always good to see families out, people walking, taking advantage of that new addition at Eden Park. And the same is true with Inwood, which is really easy to get to for me. And the kids and the squeals of delight on all of that play equipment is just, it's really delightful. I'm glad about the work we're doing, that we're bringing these projects online, and we're just getting started.
Yeah.
Thanks, staff.
Well, thank you for joining us at those openings. It's been a pleasure to share the podium with you, and just calling attention to all of that good work, and that's what we're doing, a lot of good work. It's been an exciting summer.
Echo all of that. Thank you so much, Kara and staff. And thank you, commissioners, for this feel-good meeting. I think we're making some real progress, and I appreciate your dedication and commitment of time, because this is a real commitment on your part. So thank you very much. Our next meeting is scheduled for September 16. I hope we're able to do that and looking at each other's faces in person, but we'll stay tuned for that. Nothing else to come before the meeting. I'm going to adjourn the meeting and hope you have a wonderful time this weekend, and look forward to our September meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye
Thank you
now.
all.